Bernie Sanders is exploding in the theater of American politics, and the Montreal theater scene is going strong, and Roosh V is still an asshole. Let's do the podcast. Not quite live from Forget the Box Studios in Montreal. This is the FTB Podcast, the only podcast you're listening to right now. All right, so let's meet our panel.
Hi, I'm James Douglas. I'm active in the Montreal theatre scene. I've been a technician, stage manager, also an actor, and worked with a lot of different companies here in Montreal.
Niall, political editor and news editor for Forget the Box.
And I'm your host with the most, Jason C. McLean. We are recording this on February the 7th, 2016. It's a Sunday evening, a balmy Sunday evening in Montreal. It was really nice weather earlier. I failed to get one of those new metro cars on the way over here. A lot of progressives are hoping that Bernie Sanders doesn't fail to get the Democratic nomination. Let's listen to his speech after the Iowa caucus.
Thank you. Iowa, thank you. Nine months ago, we came to this beautiful city. We had no political organization. We had no money. We had no name recognition. And we were taking on the most powerful political organization in the United States of America. And tonight, while the results are still not known, it looks like we are in a virtual tie. It looks like we'll have about half of the Iowa delegates.
Bernie Sanders at the primary, or the Iowa caucus, sounding very happy. Niall, do you think that was a good moment for American politics?
Well, I mean, given that American politics has never been my cup of tea, I mean, I actually recognize a lot of the interesting things that happened in that primary in Iowa. I mean, in general, in Bernie Sanders' campaign, and, you know, as somebody who is much more left than, let's say, the gravitational center of the Democratic Party, I think that there's something really interesting that's happening in American politics, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a few months ago, I think what he said in the speech is 6 months ago, he was like polling at 6% and Clinton was polling at 60%, but now they were almost neck and neck. And some say that even if you look at when you find out after that, for some strange reason, the Iowa caucus was ultimately decided by a bunch of coin flips, which is a strange way for a superpower to assess its political future. But still, he's now right up there with Hillary Clinton. And do you think the Clinton camp is starting to get scared?
Well, I obviously think the Clinton camp is starting to get scared. I think that, Bernie, more than just, a charismatic 75-year-old, is the embodiment of a movement within American politics and within, I think, establishment, the Democratic Party, against the establishment of the Democratic Party. So I think that, Clinton is getting scared. I think this could go basically in the same way it went for her in 2008, where Obama came basically out of nowhere. And let's not forget that Obama didn't even win New Hampshire or Nevada. He won South Carolina. So, I mean, we're looking at Bernie probably winning New Hampshire, and then after that we're looking at, Bernie basically 2 points behind in the national polls for the Democratic nomination. So, I mean, this is a red alert for the Clinton team.
Yeah. If Bernie does go on to win the nomination, is there a Republican challenger that you hope that he ends up facing? Is there a particular one? Is it Trump? Is it Cruz? Who do you think Bernie has the best chance of maybe beating?
Well, I mean, I would like to see him, not necessarily because I think he has the best chance out of all of the candidates of beating him. I mean, he has a pretty good chance of beating Trump. But I would like to see a polarization within the American political spectrum, and I think that that's something that we're seeing right now with the xenophobic sort of populist right wing rhetoric we're hearing coming out of the Republicans that, I mean, is even worse than when Newt Gingrich was part of the race, and that's pretty hard to top. I mean, so I would like to see Donald Trump just because I would like to have a real clear, divide between Bernie and Bernie on the left and Donald on the right.
Bernie, who talks about the billionaire class, and Donald is in the billionaire class, or close to it, maybe. I don't know if he's billionaire. He's funding his own campaign. But it's definitely would be an amazing polarization in American politics. Do you think that because the United States is like the one remaining world superpower, well, I mean, China, it's debatable, but at least culturally, the United States is probably the one remaining superpower. If the United States goes democratic socialist, what effect do you think that will have on the rest of the world?
Well, I think that the rest of the world, I mean, the United States, for a lot of people now, looking at the United States and everybody's getting fired up about Bernie Sanders and the fact that he's a democratic socialist. I mean, there are certain stances that Bernie has, right, that are not as left wing as I would like. I mean, especially on the Middle Eastern conflict with Israel and Palestine, a bunch of other issues. Bernie, let's just to make it clear, is a New Deal Democrat, right? Like Noam Chomsky said, he's a New Deal Democrat. So he's somebody that would be perfectly aligned with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, right, back in the 1930s. So I mean, it's a step forward, and I think it's a step forward because he's basically bringing a political movement that could have and gain huge political power with sort of the reference points and the symbols that were mobilized by Occupy in 2011, right? So I mean, that's something that I think is going to have effects throughout the world. What real effects Bernie might have, or the Bernie movement might have in Canada, for example, and Quebec, is probably with this whole soul searching that the NDP is going through, or the left wing movement, that you can run a left wing campaign, or at least a campaign that adheres to some sort of left wing ideals, and you can be a populist and you can win. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing to be a populist, right? To create a polarization between people that are the elites in the system and that control, the financial monetary system, and the people that are actually suffering from the austerity that they're putting forward. Something that I don't think that left-wing parties, unfortunately, and the NDP especially, captured in the last election. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned. This being said, for the rest of the world, there's a lot of amazing stuff, and there's been a lot of amazing stuff happening. And I think America, instead of leading this sort of revolt against establishment politics, against bipartisan politics, because we shouldn't forget that, Bernie basically was not part of the Democratic Party until now, right?
He was an independent, yeah.
Outside the Democratic Party, and the sort of outside revolt, and he's basically taking over the Democratic Party, which probably makes a lot of people feel very uncomfortable. So this anti-establishment sort of politics has been happening throughout the West and in Latin America. I mean, well before it was happening here. And I think it just goes to show that the neoliberal sort of premise, the neoliberal idea of how the world works and how the world should turn, and how economics should work, is in great danger.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to chime in and just say, I mean, I'll keep it brief. I think my idea in the past with the U.S. elections has been much of a pessimist. because I've been thinking a long time that they don't have a democracy there. It's not a real political system. You can't have a political system based on a two-party system. I don't believe anyway. It is very non-realistic, and it's not functioning. And they just put in the powers that need to be there, and it flip-flops from one party to another and back there, and it goes back to the other party and go back. And that's not a democracy. That's not a real political system that has any kind of credibility from my point of view. And to see something like Bernie come up like that is an optimistic, but with a pessimistic bent that I am always with. I mean, a long time ago, I just said I didn't think there was anything really that was going to stop Hillary from being elected, and Trump was just a clown and a distraction. And I think he still is, and there are other clowns and distractions going on at the same time. And Bernie is a note of optimism, but I still would like to get proven wrong. I'm waiting for them to prove me wrong. And I'm just saying there's no way that, they'll let this system go without coming back and falling back into the old system that's a bipartisan, flip-flop, non-democracy.
If I may, I think that I agree with the outlook you have and the sort of negative outlook on stuff. I think that Iowa was I might be going out here on a limb, but I think that winning 6 coin tosses in a row is pretty indicative of the fact that the establishment of the Democratic Party really will go to great lengths to make sure that Bernie doesn't win. So I don't necessarily think that Bernie has won, but I think that in a certain way, Bernie has already won, and he's succeeded in doing what he wanted to do at the start of this campaign, which was change the rhetoric within the Democratic Party and within American politics in general. And if you look back to the 1960s and you look to Barry Goldwater, who was the Republican nominee, right? And he won the Republican nomination. He was a fringe candidate. He was considered by many as being a complete radical and neoliberal radical, not understanding American politics and all that. And he wins the nomination, and then 20 years go by, and then Reagan comes back on, and he says that one of his biggest inspirations was Barry Goldwater. By the way, Hillary Clinton volunteered for Barry Goldwater back in the 60s. So I think Bernie, could have that effect on American politics. Maybe not win right now, but create the leeway for movements to gain more importance, like the Socialist Alternative that are doing great work in Seattle, etc., and for them to take a more prominent place within the American political scene.
Yeah. One thing I find interesting, too, is Bernie is playing the theater of politics very well, which is something that at first, with the very first interview of him, he was basically, his hair was blowing. He was in Vermont, and he said, I'm going to keep this brief because I got some other things to do today, but I'm running for president. And Jon Stewart made fun of it now. But then you see his rhetoric on stage is very solid about the 99%, the Occupy rhetoric. But then when you see a TV commercial of his, it's like there's Simon and Garfunkel playing, and it's all about the quest for what is America or something like that. I think his communications team has really found a way to, I guess, maybe package this political sort of revolution back to the New Deal days in a very sort of mom and apple pie kind of way. Do you think that they're on the right track with that?
Yeah, I think that their political communications is very good. I think that a lot of the people that gravitated around Obama back in the day are gravitating around Bernie now, and what you see is a lot of the same rhetoric, right, that is used by that communications team. What I would say though is I think that there's always some kind of disconnect though between the old school sort of socialist rhetoric that we hear from Bernie in his speeches, and then those more light and jolly sort of ads that are coming out. But I think that the blend is amazing, and I think that they've really succeeded in taking a candidate that nobody thought had a chance in hell in just 6 months ago, and to bring him to prominence. Even if, let's say, Bernie fades out after New Hampshire, he still will have had an impact on so many young voters and the next generation of progressive minds in the United States that, I mean, it's undeniable that Bernie had a huge impact, right? And one of the interesting things is Jacobin magazine. I read them a lot. I think they're a great magazine. Kudos to them. And they were, they're much more left than I would even say Bernie's campaign. But one of the things that they were saying is that just the fact that a lot of young caucus goers in Iowa, are saying, well, I'm going to go vote for a democratic socialist. That's something that's revolutionary in itself.
Well, that's the other side of this. And a lot, it doesn't appear, it appears in some areas, but not a lot of people are sentiment to the idea that, well, are they looking at it from the point of view that is the U.S. ready to have a woman president? And a lot of people are supporting that. And I'm not saying that my pessimism against the U.S. election and Hillary winning is a vote against not having a woman president. I mean, yes, it can, providing, I think, if her mandate focuses on those items that need to be focused on, that is inclusive of what the women in the United States might need and want, and the progression of that.
No.
I mean, I think I'm far from being a Hillary Clinton supporter for many reasons, but I do think that the America. I think that Clinton is ready to be president in every sort of, and by saying this in the normal establishment sort of way, right? I mean, she has the CV that she has a better CV than a lot of American presidents, right? So, I mean, and especially when you look at Reagan and all that, I mean, it's pretty much a joke. But I mean, Clinton has a great CV. Now, is America ready to have a female president? Is Canada ready to have a female prime minister? I don't think so, and I don't really know, but I don't think so. And I think that one of the things that we're not seeing yet in this Democratic primary, and one of the things that I think will be brought up once the general election is there, is that the Republicans are going to attack pretty hard if Clinton is a nominee on the fact that she is a woman, and that is very unfortunate. And I would, even though I do not share the views of a lot of Clinton supporters, I just want to say that basically I think that it's a great thing that there are women getting involved and that want the first woman president. I would like to see Elizabeth Warren become the first woman president of the United States. I wanted her to run this time around. It didn't happen. And I do sincerely hope that if Clinton takes the nomination, that she will be able to, counter all of those hateful attacks that might come her way.
What if Bernie gets the nomination and makes Elizabeth Warren his vice president?
That would be amazing. I think if Warren becomes vice president, that would be a huge step forward. That would also cement, being somebody who had a lot of hope for Obama back in 2008, right? I hoped that, his vice president pick was going to be somebody that was going to be a clear message to maybe the left of center Democratic base that existed at the time, or that might exist in America, and it wasn't. I mean, it was Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a pretty establishment figure. And then after that, he nominated Thomas E. Geithner, right, to the Fed. So, yeah. I mean, as Treasury Secretary, excuse me. And, I mean, that was just a message to Wall Street that don't worry, I might have had a very populist and sort of left-wing rhetoric during the primaries and during the election, but that's not going to really happen once I become president. So, I mean, if Bernie was to nominate Warren as vice president, it would be a strong message to Wall Street. We're not playing games anymore, So.
Yeah, I'd support that.
Yeah, I think I would definitely support that too. The only thing I worry about is that people... Actually, no, I think Bernie wouldn't care. I think Bernie could do something like that, whereas the logic would be is you have to counterbalance Bernie with somebody more of like a right-leaning Democrat than someone like Elizabeth Warren. But I think, no, Bernie wouldn't play that game. He's not going to put somebody as second in line to him who would completely change his platform and policy if anything should happen to him. So I think he would go with Warren. And I think also too we should just take a little listen to some of the political theater that the Bernie team has been doing really well.
Our job is not to divide. Our job is to bring people together. If we do not allow them to divide us up by race, by sexual orientation, by gender, by not allowing them to divide us up by whether or not we were born in America or whether we're immigrants. When we stand together as white, black, and Hispanic, and gay, and straight, and woman, and man, when we stand together and demand that this country works for all of us rather than the few, we will transform America, and that is what this campaign is about. It's bringing people together.
Bit of the theater of politics, and the Montreal theater scene has been actually doing quite well these days. James, tell us a little bit about what's been happening in the Montreal theater scene in 2016.
Well, I mean, it's very active and it's very dynamic, and there's a lot going on. I probably forget, some elements of it, but I mean, there's groups that are creating pieces on a regular basis, and I love seeing the activity in the Montreal, mostly Anglo theater scene that I'm exposed to here. But there's a lot of bilingual productions. There's a lot of mixed productions going on, and a couple of new companies that are also starting.
Such as?
Well, one of the new companies that I just saw show is called Playshed, and they're a new Anglo theatre company in Montreal, and they created a piece called Coq. It's actually been produced before, and they're producing it at the Montreal Arts Culturel on Jean Mont Street.
The
Maille, yeah. And it's a wonderful piece, and I'm hoping that they can continue the support and get the people out in bums and seats. So that goes until the 14th. So I encourage everybody to go see that. Also, a show that closed last night was called Pig Girl, and that was by Imago. And that's also quite an outstanding piece, relatively new, loosely based on what happened with the Robert Pickton murders West, and about First Nations missing and murdered Indigenous women. And that was quite dramatic, quite moving, and a well-produced show. Another one, I know Macbeth, I think, just closed at St. Catherine. And,
aren't you not supposed to? I guess you're not involved with the play right now because you're not supposed to say that name if you're involved in any active theater.
No, if you're in the building.
If you're in the building, okay,
yes.
you can say it on the podcast.
If you're in a theater, you are not supposed to mention the Scottish play, but this is not a theater, so I think I can get away with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, one thing I've noticed too about the Montreal theater scene is it sort of expands too. There's a lot of, for example, burlesque shows. There's a lot of some burlesque shows that tie into theater, like Candy Ass Cabaret, shows like that too. Mm-hmm. Do you see the Montreal, at least the Montreal English theater, is sort of maybe expanding into other areas that aren't traditionally theater? Or do you consider that part of the theater scene, or do you see it as a different animal altogether?
Well, no, I see it as part of a theater scene in that it's related to the stage. All events that go on stage. It's just not necessarily scripted. It's more cabaret style. And, it happens on a stage and it's entertainment, but it's not done in a formal way that it's a scripted piece. People sit and watch a story unfold, and the actors are more physical performers often and not necessarily scripted actors. And there's not usually a single director involved in like a burlesque show, let's say. There's, an overseer, people who organize it. But it's not necessarily directed as a theater piece. But there are, people who do both. There are actors who do burlesque and burlesque performers that do theater. So there's a crossover there. Yeah.
And as far as, I guess, the Montreal, the French theater scene is obviously larger because it's a majority French city. But do you say, does the Montreal English scene, do you think it gets the same kind of international recognition that, say, the French scene does, or that like other English scenes in other cities do?
I mean, the French theater scene here is very dynamic as well. It's very busy, and there's a lot of companies that are getting quite good funding from the government of both Canada and Quebec and Montreal to produce their wares. And sometimes they get recognized internationally and they can even tour. But outside of Quebec, they don't always get produced in other provinces. So you'd get some translations of French scripts that are translated into English, and then they get a remount or a reproduction in another province. There are smaller communities in French in other provinces that occasionally do also get French productions, but they're not usually long runs, and they're usually smaller productions.
Yeah. Well, Montreal, I know, like for example, last podcast we had for Donovan on talking about the Montreal music scene, which does get the kind of recognition because you get bands like Arcade Fire coming out of it, and the other artist whose name escapes me right now, but Do you see potentially the Montreal theater scene going the same way as the Montreal music scene? I mean, or is there something about the climate of Montreal that maybe lends itself more to music than to theater, or is it more of just something that hasn't happened?
I mean, I may go towards more involving more musical acts, but I think it's quite separated as opposed to bands for music and then artists who create theater. There are musicals, of course, but Montreal isn't known for a big Broadway, presentation. You do get the occasional show done at, for instance, the Seagull Center. There's a musical in Broadway. There's a market for that. There are some groups on the West Island that do that too. They like performing on musicals, but the groups, for instance, on the West Island don't necessarily get the bulk of the public funding. They're usually privately funded or they're amateur groups.
Yeah.
There's groups, for instance, in coaching of high schools and other groups that get support from their fan base, do musicals, and young people get involved, and some of the adult productions, people with older people in the cast, get their funding from private sources as well.
Yeah, but do you see, for example, maybe specific directors or actors are achieving the level of success that some of the Montreal musicians have, like the way the Arcade Fire has? Do you see? Are there any particular talent on the scene?
You do get some of them who make success outside of Montreal. They tend to go to New York or Toronto anyway. There's been a couple of productions written by Steve Galluccio.
Okay,
and he's he made Mambo Italiano. And which went on to make a film. It was produced in the United States. It was produced in Canada. It went across. It's touring across Quebec, and and it's
Fenario too.
David Fenario is slightly lesser, because he's not known outside of the Montreal area. Fenario hasn't necessarily written musicals.
You're right. Yeah.
Even then, Mambo Italiano is not technically a musical, per se.
I was speaking more just in terms of the success that the musicians had, not actually doing music themselves.
No, but the success is related to whether they do a stage play without music or whether it's a musical. They still get known outside if they have a success that's in New York or goes to Toronto and makes success.
Yeah. And what about you, Niall? Have you seen any local plays?
Well, I was actually part of Michael Simkin, who was candidate for Côte des Neiges and the G for Pôle Montréal back in the day. I met Jake through that. Actually, he was part of the Oppressed network here in Quebec, so I did participate in that back in the day. I mean, it's been a few years, but and unfortunately, I haven't seen plays that recently. But I mean, all of that was said right now sounds amazing.
No, it's definitely a very vibrant scene, and you should definitely go and check it out. Montreal is a city known for the arts. We're also a city known for some pretty radical activism, and we're also a city known for not putting up with bullshit. Such bullshit in the form of Roosh V, an international asshole, basically a man who supports legalizing rape on private property, and he recently did a series of international meetups that he wasn't even in town for, and the Montreal meetup was definitely thwarted by a group of feminists, and one of the people who was there was Katie Nelson, and I had a chance to speak with her a little earlier. So, Katie, tell us a little bit about what happened last night, Saturday night.
In terms of the Roosh V stuff,
yeah.
There's a small contingent organized plan in terms of just bringing awareness about Roosh V and kind of stopping what was going on. Roosh V called International Meetup Day, and so although he told the media he canceled them, we all knew that wasn't true. And so essentially we went to where the gang of Roosh V followers were going to meet up and encountered the Montreal host of Roosh V Matters.
And you, I saw you posted him on Facebook, and you guys are attempting to identify who he is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what gave you the idea that it wasn't really canceled?
Organizing around this kind of stuff for a while, and we knew that it was very likely it wasn't canceled, and that I think the intention of him trying to cancel it was certainly and honestly out of fear for safety. And so I think by saying that they were canceled, he hoped that would alleviate some of the pressure against those kind of meetings that he was receiving internationally from different cities. And so I just figured that it was a bluff, and it was.
Yeah, and no, I noticed one thing. One thing Roosh V and his followers are known for is doxing people, basically releasing people's personal information, so his army of online trolls can harass the hell out of him. But something very interesting happened. He got doxed himself on I believe it was last Thursday night.
Yep, he did.
And he doesn't seem to be too happy about that, does he?
No, and it's the same thing. It's like the guy who runs the Montreal chapter for Return of Kings. It's the same thing. And that once we got a picture of him and put it online, a lot of them, my Twitter's been blown up from lots of these men's rights activists who are freaking out because Roosh V was doxed. This other guy's getting doxed. And I think part of it is also, I think there's an aspect of it that he promises his followers that they won't be doxed. And in his FAQ for the meetup, he says that you won't be doxed. And I think a lot of it is pride for him, that he's the only one who can effectively use that tactic. And I think he just screwed around with the wrong people this time and ended up getting doxed himself. And then on top of that, I think in terms of the Montreal host that we encountered, same thing is that they don't think that they'll be held accountable, or that they'll get doxed, or that any of this will ever happen to them. And I think it's also important to note is all the information that has been put out about Roosh V and will be put out about this other guy is publicly accessible information. So there's kind of a different there's a different component to each. Is that doxing for Roosh V is trying to get your friends, the people who know you, to give personal information about you that isn't public. Whereas what happened to Roosh V is that was all public information, and it was accessible in his business corporation registry, because of course those documents are public, and he put his own address online. And same with the other guy, and the information about him is all publicly accessible. So I think it's funny because it kind of backfired against them, is that they themselves don't have good internet security either. Yeah,
it's kind of ironic, and it's maybe they figured something like this would never happen. But Roosh, you're kind of known. One of the reasons your Twitter might be blowing up too is you were kind of, I guess we can say this now. You were known for throwing a beer in Roosh's face last summer in Montreal, right?
Yes.
Yes, and tell us a little bit about that, how it felt, and how it feels that the people actually know it's you who did it now.
It's been so long, and I haven't been able to say anything about it, and it's hard because it was so viral, and so many people were talking about it, speculating about it, and every part of me wanted to explain what happened, and it was difficult because I also didn't want to endanger myself or my friends, and so now that he finally cracked the case, it's a huge pressure off my shoulders in terms of being able to talk about what actually happened that night, and being able to put out a true side of the story, in terms of being the person who did it, I guess, or the woman who drew beer on Roosh V. And so it is, I'm loving it. I'm loving the fact that he's the one who put it out in public, and I'm just so grateful that somebody finally figured it out. So yeah, it's been quite a relief to finally be able to talk about it, because I wasn't able to before, obviously. To
finally come out in the open. And one final question, just for people who don't know, tell us exactly what is wrong with this Roosh V guy.
Okay, so Roosh V is a pickup artist, as he calls himself, and he runs and owns Return of Kings website. So essentially it's a website, it's heavily veiled in men's rights activism, but also super misogynistic, very sexist, really demeaning toward women, really demeaning toward people of color, transgender people, anybody in the LGBTQ community. It's a really problematic site. It's a really problematic guy. So essentially one of the most things, his claim to fame in terms of all of his infamy is his rape advocacy. So he did a lecture series and wrote an article and an argument for the legalization of rape, and continues to kind of advocate it in a very strange way. Although after all of this international attention, he's attempting to retract his statements, but they're quite blatant. He thinks that it's on private property that rape should be legalized. Moreover, and what's problematic, and it's not the only comment he's made, is that he talks about rape as being a seductive tool to use on women. Is that one of the quotes I think he said was, a good rape is when a woman goes from not liking it to loving it or something. And so he's a really bad guy.
Yeah.
A lot of his followers are really bad people, and a lot of people defend what he says and try to contextualize it and even justify it to cultural norms. So yeah, he's not good news. He's a very misogynistic guy. Even my personal encounter with him last summer, he was very manipulative, almost like very like a sociopath, like very strange, like talks in a strange way, acts in a strange way, and then on top of that, you have all of the stuff that he defends.
Yeah, and actually I do have one final question I realize is hearing, one thing I've been seeing a lot on the internet is people claiming, even feminists, some of them, saying that we shouldn't give this guy more attention, we should just ignore him. What do you say to those people?
Well, rape is a pretty serious issue, so I don't think we should go around ignoring it. Moreover, there's an entire group of men in Montreal, in the city alone, who have meetings and discuss this kind of stuff and talk about this stuff and find arguments to justify it. I think ignoring these issues is pretending like they aren't issues in the first place. So I mean, I've heard the argument that we're essentially giving him more book sales and like putting him on a higher platform. But at the same time, if you look at it, he's now banned from a few different countries. A lot of cities don't want him within the city at all either. A lot of bars, restaurants, in and around where he lives, as well as places he visits, have banned him. It makes him look terrible, and it also brings the issue of misogyny and sexism and violence against women to the forefront again. So, like, for example, last night, all these cities across the world where he called these international meetups, they all had protests discussing violence against women. And I think that, if anything, Roosh V is helping to propel the fact that rape and violence against women is still an issue in society. And so I definitely don't think we should ignore it. I think people who suggest that we should ignore people like Roosh V or people who follow Roosh V may not be able to accept the fact that that men still think it's okay to rape women is not an issue, and it's a huge issue right now in our society.
And thank you very much for, I guess, keeping this in the forefront and keeping up the fight. Katie, thank you very much for being with us today.
No worries, thank you.
So Roosh got his comeuppance again. It really makes me proud to be a Montrealer to see that we don't put up with people like this. And I'm wondering if this will be the death knell for Roosh's quote unquote career.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty proud of what happened. I mean, kudos to Katie Nelson for doing that. I mean, it was great to see that douchebag, that piece utter be humiliated in that way. This being said, unfortunately, I think that it's beyond Roosh V. Roosh V is a manifestation of a big problem within our culture. Rape culture, all of that. And I think that unfortunately even people, he can always spin it, and he's very good at manipulating and spinning stuff, and he'll spin it in a way to his advantage. So, I mean, I hope it's his death. I mean, he's, as I said, and I'll say it again. But this being said, I think that there will be other Roosh V's, and that the struggle continues to make sure that that it be this viral, that it be less viral, that any sort of reference to rape culture, sort of actions like Roosh V has taken and happened throughout the world and here in Canada too, that they're completely eliminated from our society.
I totally agree with you. I'm on board for that too. It's we should feel a bit of pride for this reception or lack of reception here in Montreal in both instances where he tried to get access to the city back in the summer and of course this past Saturday. And I was there at Katie in spirit. I was attending a show, so I couldn't be part of the protest that greeted his kind or his ilk that were here. And I also want to bring up that he in no way should be confused with the women's rights activists, but which is another form of problem on its own. But with Roosh, I mean, there's no excuse for his existence and the type of, you can't even call it work, kind of misogynist
trolling
activism that he calls work that he does, and he's been quoted in saying, "This is my livelihood. This is what he does," and it's sad because it's really evil, and other. Thank you. Like him should not get a voice, and even saying his name over and over again and giving him airtime is something I'd rather not do. I'd wish he would just fade into the woodwork and disappear.
And if you guys are listening to this on iTunes, you probably heard a lot of bleeps in that little bit, but you can listen to the actual version, the uncensored version, and to know what people were calling Roosh on forgetthebox.net. And while he's gone, or he wasn't even here, just his local representatives were fleshed out. We could be happy, and there's a lot to enjoy in Montreal coming up. Let's actually listen to the community calendar.
February 11th kickstarts Cooper McGill's Social Justice Days series. The series intends to offer an alternative political culture in the McGill community and beyond, and promises a broad range of captivating workshops, panels, and activities. This year, their theme is Art Resistance, and aims to draw attention to artistic and alternative ways of organizing. Beginning this Saturday, February 13th until the 20th, the Daily Publication Society is hosting its annual Journalism Week, this year in collaboration with The Link. The week kicks off with a French press conference Saturday and with a workshop on race and the media on Monday, February 15th, with award-winning speaker Kim Milan. Full schedule available on the Daily and the Link's Facebook page. Sunday at 3 p.m., join the Missing Justice Collective in their annual March for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. The march, founded in Vancouver in 1991, first came about in response to a murder of the Coast Salish woman that received little attention by police or media. Although the march commemorates women of all backgrounds, emphasis will be given to Native women, who are the disproportionate targets of systemic violence. The event is at 3 p.m. at Metro Saint Laurent. Friday, February 19th, Magic Perm is performing at The Plant with Sweat and Lillian King. The event takes place Friday, February 19th at 9 p.m.
Okay, now it's time for predictions.
I predict that our esteemed Prime Minister Trudeau will find yet another reason not to another reason to postpone his taking those fighter jets out of the war in Syria. So,
Niall?
I was going to say something about the Liberals and breaking promises, but that was already done. So I'm going to say something about, well, I'm pretty sure that Bernie is going to win in New Hampshire this next Tuesday, and Hillary Clinton, to stop the bleeding to Bernie within the Democratic primaries, is going to send out a press release saying that Karl Marx was her mentor, and to try to stop that socialist bleeding. So that was just a little joke on my part, but I think that we're going to see Hillary go more and more left to try to stop Bernie, and we'll see what happens. I hope that Bernie can pick up some steam, in Nevada with, Latino voters, and in South Carolina with African-American voters, and let's hope that he can take those both states and put an end to the shenanigans within this Democratic Party so we can have a real debate between him and Trump.
I think Roosh V is going to officially endorse Donald Trump for President of the United States and let more people know why they shouldn't vote for Trump. And second, and I've never been wrong on this one, the domestication of the dog will continue unabated. So that's it for our podcast. You can read both Niall and James on Forget the Box. And James, also, you're part of a choir, right? You have a choir performance coming up.
Yes, the People's Gospel Choir of Montreal. I've been singing with them for almost 15 years now, and we are going to be presenting two events. One is an event at the St. James United Church on Sunday in the morning, a service that will be part of Black History Month, and it's going to be International Nelson Mandela Day. And then later in the afternoon at the Union United Church, down here near the Point in St. Henry, we're going to be presenting a more official ceremony for Mandela Day and singing at both of them. Yeah.
Wow. So thank you guys very much for being part of the podcast. We'll catch you in 2 weeks. The FTB podcast by the Forget the Box Media Collective in Montreal was hosted by Jason C. McLean and produced by Hannah Besseau. For daily, unique, original content covering news, music, politics, arts, lifestyles, food, film, you name it, we've got it. Check out forgetthebox.net.